Hello, and thank you for joining us in this series of Chalk Talks on Agile Data Integration. This is the first in a series on Agile Data Integration to show you ways and techniques that you can use to improve the data integration process. But first, let's take a look at lean integration, some of the principles that it promotes. And then we'll take a look at Agile Data Integration and some of the best practices that we suggest and the relationship between these two. Lean, first and foremost, focuses on eliminating non-value added tasks from the customer's perspective, and then eliminating or at least alleviating some of the pain associated with manual tasks by automating the processes where possible. It's also critical to empower the team in every way possible so that they can do the best job and the most efficient job at what they do. You also need to focus on continuous improvement and therefore learning as you go along and then finding ways to improve the process as you go forward. Building quality in to the process at every stage. Change is imminent, so plan for change. And instead of optimizing the individual steps, it's best to optimize the whole process from the customer perspective once again. Now, lean is a set of principles, but it doesn't dictate which type of methodology to use, whether it's the traditional cascade project managed approach or whether it's an agile approach. And so what I'd like to suggest is and recommend is that Agile has a lot to offer in the way of data integration. Agile focuses on maximizing the business value of your data integration projects. It also recognizes that these projects are complex in nature and you're going to discover things along the way, and therefore an empirical process is much more suited as opposed to trying to plan everything up front, planning the schedule, the cost, the price, the resources. Take a more empirical experimental approach with frequent iterations. Agile recommends 2 or 4 week iterations, and that will enable you to adjust and adapt as you go along to reach your goal. Third is Agile requires much better collaboration between management, the customer, and the development teams, as opposed to this throw it over the wall and wait and see approach. And then it's important to be able to, once again, empower the team. We bring that from lean, and remove any impediments. So what's often referred to as the Scrum Master, if you use the Scrum approach to Agile, that person needs to remove impediments. Anything that is obstructing or distracting the team, that person needs to focus on. And sometimes this involves giving him the best tools and technology to get the job done efficiently and effectively. Frequent assessment is also important. I mentioned the iterative approach, 2-4 week approach. This allows you to frequently inspect, assess, and adjust things as you go along, and also enables a more adaptive response so that management can see the progress, make decisions on moving forward. And also it's a very balanced approach to the design and production. Instead of scheduling 2 to 3 months for design and 2 to 3 months for production, and then 6 months later the business finally gets to see what they had asked for, that's too long. And by that time maybe the requirements have changed and the business has moved on. Remember, as you're going through this process, you're going to discover new requirements along the way and need to adjust and reprioritize those as you move forward. So these Chalk Talks are going to focus a lot on the process. We will talk about data governance and architecture and how it relates and how it can improve the Agile data integration process, but primarily we're going to focus on the process. And so what you see here is the typical development and process, nothing really specific to data integration, but we can blow this out a bit and make it more relevant to a typical data integration process, namely finding the data sources and targets first, before you can move forward, being able to profile these data sources to uncover issues, discover, to get familiar with it, to understand the data better, and to see if there's any data quality issues that need to be resolved. Also in understanding how these disparate data sources can be joined, and then looking to see if there's any data quality rules that can be applied, whether it's related to standardization or consistency or completeness of the data. And then an analyst is going to go in and define mapping specifications in terms of moving the data from the sources to the targets. Development needs to estimate the project scope based on doing some due diligence and impact analysis. And then finally, you're going to build the data integration deliverables and artifacts, test them, and then deploy them. It's been shown and studied that lean principles being applied in Agile data integration can cut project throughput times by 90% and double productivity. So this in of itself is reason enough to adopt some of these best practices. Now, just in terms of fun and games, we've all played, or most of us, at least in North America, have played a game when we were kids called Chutes and Ladders. And the reason I bring this up is that one technique to measure how well you're doing in terms of lean is what percentage of projects make it through the first time in your so-called well-defined process. Invariably, the answer we get back quite often is 0. Imagine, 0 projects make it through the first time. And why is this? Because the process isn't perfect. You learn things along the way, and often you have to revisit steps either due to mistakes or rework or things like that. And so this game that we played as kids is not too different than the game we play in data integration, where the goal is to go from 1 to 100 around the board. You roll the dice. If you land on a ladder, great, you get to move ahead, skip ahead, and to me that's improving the process. If you land on a chute, wow, you get thrown back and you have to repeat steps, and that's unfortunate. So Lean and Agile can help you avoid the chutes and discover the ladders. Now, one technique that's applied quite often is improving the process, that is what's called a value stream map. And what you do is you take a project that maybe you completed fairly recently, you get some of the key stakeholders, go into a room with some post-its and a whiteboard, and you draw on that whiteboard and use post-its to identify the steps in the process that you needed to take. And while you're doing that, that is to complete the project, and while you're doing that, you identify each of the steps that's value added and how long it took, and non-value added and how long that took. And then you add up all the value add and the non-value add, and you take a ratio, and that ratio is the non-value added to value added tasks, and you try to minimize that. You want to minimize the non-value add. So we're going to employ this technique as we go through each of these chalk talks, and the goal is to take the as-is process and improve it and compress it, eliminate non-value added tasks, and make even value-added tasks more efficient and effective to get to a more efficient to-be process. And so I've identified 8 key principles, or best practices I should say, that you can apply that borrow from the Agile methodology and leverage lean principles. First, the business and IT must work efficiently and effectively to translate the requirements and specifications into data services. Second, it's important to apply rapid prototyping and validation of mapping specifications and business rules. So frequently, as you go through each of the iterations, be prototyping and validating that you are in fact meeting those goals. Third, leverage an integrated business glossary of terms, an information catalog, if you will, and the metadata for enabling rapid search, to be able to quickly do an impact analysis, and to optimize your process as you look to find the data sources and targets that you need. Fourth, data profiling is key. It should be used continuously throughout the design and development phases so that you get a clear understanding of what the data is looking like before, during, and after. Build data quality into the process. Build it into your data integration process so that you are delivering trusted data. The data needs to be consistent, complete, accurate, standardized. 6. By taking a model-driven approach to your architecture, you can insulate applications from underlying data changes. And this is through what I'll call data virtualization. I'll have more to say on this in future Chalk Talks. And then minimize the delivery time and maximize reuse through flexible deployment options of your data services. Once again, we're leveraging this model-driven approach and this data virtualization architecture to minimize the delivery time. We'll see how that's done in a future Chalk Talk. And then finally, leverage test data management and automation wherever possible to increase your test coverage and reduce errors. We've seen many organizations being able to reduce the time to get the projects done by reducing the amount of time it takes to test and validate the data integration rules. And why is this? Well, most of the time of a project is not necessarily in building the things, it's in testing and validation. And that concludes the first Chalk Talk in this series on Agile Data Integration. Thank you.